Hello, esteemed Phi Beta Kappa colleagues, friends, family. My name is Stephanie Liu. I'm on faculty at the School of Medicine. I'm a professor of health science. It is my distinct honor to welcome you all to tonight's 50th Mu Chapter's anniversary celebration alumni dinner. We have a very special program tonight. I would like to invite you to continue to enjoy your meals during this program. So in 1974, the year I was born, very important year, at the behest of the UC Irvine's founding chancellor, Chancellor Aldrich, 70 PBK faculty members applied for and received a charter that established the Mu chapter of California at the UC Irvine, placing UC Irvine among a select group of universities across the nation with Phi Beta Kappa chapter. 50 years later, looking out at our room, our founding members can be so proud of us. 3 of the chapter's founding members are actually here. Actually, one is here, 2 are two founding members over here. Sorry, because I was missing one. So, and I would like to give them the special recognition and appreciation. Founders, if you could please stand or remain seated, or just raise your hand when I call out your names. Okay. Founder, past chapter president, and current chapter historian, Professor Emeritus of Physics and Astronomy. Okay. Sorry, wrong information. Current professor of physics and astronomy, Dr. Virginia Trimble. Founder, past chapter president, and Professor Emeritus of Physics, Emeritus and Physics and Astronomy, Dr. Jonas Schultz. Not here. Founder, past chapter president, and Professor Emeritus of Political Science, Dr. James Danziger. Founder, past chapter president, professor of, I assume is physics and astronomy, Dr. Bill Parker. We're here today because your and your colleagues' effort 50 years ago. I would like to invite everyone here to express appreciation to you with a standing ovation. As you can see, physical science professors rule the world, right? You're the minority there.
Physicists are the true liberal arts scholars of the world.
That's right. I would like to thank our immediate past president, Susan King, whose tenure this past year oversaw our chapter's 50th anniversary celebration, including, in addition to its usual program, the dedication of the PBK Bridge, affixed with our society's motto, "Love of learning is the guide of life," and the PBK Keys, thereby increasing UCI's visibility as a prestigious campus with a PBK chapter, and bringing together and recognizing our founding fathers, who in 1974 established the Mu chapter at UC Irvine, placing UC Irvine among a highly select group of 297 universities with a PBK chapter. I'd like to invite Susan to stand up, for everyone to join me to give her a round of applause. Thank you, Susan. No. No. Yeah, did I? I would also like to recognize and thank the Vice Provost for Teaching and Learning, Dean of Undergraduate Education, and Professor of Physics and Astronomy. Again, there's a theme there, can you see? Yeah. Dr. Michael Denon. For his support of PBK's diversity and inclusive excellence initiatives, including removing the financial barriers to membership so that lifetime membership in PBK is open to everyone, not just for those who can afford it. Thank you. His and the Provost's office have paid the full membership fee and the induction ceremony and the reception costs, the membership certificates for all the inductees, and the cost of the annual PBK Book Award. I would like to have Dr. Denon stand up again one more time. Another round of applause. I feel so honored to be the president of a PBK MU chapter here at the UC Irvine. Being the president of a PBK carries significant responsibilities and honor. I am committed to become a leader who is dedicated to the promotion of scholarly excellence and intellectual enrichment. I still remember the day I was inducted as a PBK member 27 years ago in 1997 at UCLA. You guys got it good. I didn't get invited to a dinner, just a celebration, and that's it. But I still remember that day, they called each one of us to the stage, just like you guys who will walk through the stage, but they told us we have to say something. So most people say, oh, I'm a graduating senior, I'm going to medical school. I'm a graduating senior, I'm going to law school. It was like a recurring theme. It's like law school, medical school, law school, medical school. I was like, oh, it's kind of boring. I was already got into medical school. I was going to medical school too, but I'm not going to say that because that's too boring. So I went up the stage. I said, I am going to be an excellent housewife. So everybody cracks up, and they gave me a large round of applause. So that was my story at my induction party. It was fun. Okay. So, as members of PBK, we're committed to academic pursuits and a passion for lifetime learning. We need to maintain an active interest in various fields of study beyond our own primary discipline, reflecting the interdisciplinary spirit. We need to uphold high ethical standards in all academic, professional, and personal endeavors. Throughout my academic and professional career in medicine, I have met numerous outstanding members of PBK. Like myself, they are actively participating and supporting the society's initiatives, staying engaged and promoting the value of PBK, including supporting their own local chapters. I have the honor of sharing some of our points of pride as we celebrate our chapter's 50th anniversary. Since 1974, UC Irvine has nominated more than 10,000 anteaters to join PBK, the nation's oldest and the most prestigious honor society. In 2021, UC Irvine's PBK chapter received PBK's Outstanding Public University Chapter Award, given only to 2 chapters in the nation every 3 years, for its effort to broadening the pool of PBK inductees. Also, in 2021, as a members of acknowledging distinction early in an undergraduate's career, the PBK Book Award was created by the past president, Jonathan Fang. And the UCI has recognizing more than 750 rising sophomores thus far. I would like to, Jonathan is not here today because he's celebrating his brother's birthday. Otherwise, he would love to celebrate with us over here. The UCMU chapter is proud to have its second PBK Key into Public Service Award recipient this year. And finally, as part of the annual programming, our chapter has brought and continue to bring prominent scholars to the UCI campus through the PBK Visiting Scholar Program, which gives students the opportunity to engage with some of the brightest minds in their fields. As alumni, you might want to ask yourself, how can I support our own local PBK chapters? How can I give back? I'm glad you're thinking this way. I'm pleased to share with you 2 major donor campaigns, which we will launch during my tenure as a chapter president. The first one is our new PBK inductee membership campaign. Due to the recent fiscal constraints, we're not getting a lot of funding from the state. This fund will help us to continue covering the membership and the associated cost for each new members. Our goal would be to give you the opportunity to pay it forward through your donation to ensure that lifetime membership in PBK is open to all new inductees, not just for those who can afford it. Additionally, donations will go forward, continuing to support the Graduate Study Award, given to 1 PBK graduating senior, continuing their education in the liberal arts and the science graduate program. The second one is our Mu Chapter Founders Plaza campaign, which will continue increasing the visibility of UCI as a PBK campus. Mu Chapter's 50th anniversary is tied to the PBK's 250th anniversary in 2026. Today's dedication of PBK Bridge with the PBK motto, "Love of learning is the guide of life," is the first step to commemorate our 50th milestone as a chapter. And our Mu Chapter Founders Plaza, including a bronze plaque with all 70 PBK founding members, and the paver stones with Mu Chapter alumni names lining the surface of the plaza, is slated to be completed in 2026. And it completed the multi-year celebration of critical milestone of PBK's and Mu Chapter's history. At this time, I'd like to invite our Vice Provost for Teaching and Learning, Deans of Division of Undergraduate Education, Professor of Physics Astronomy, Dr. Michael Denon, to the podium.
Thank you so much, and congratulations to everyone who got inducted today. It's been such an amazing day with so many good things. It is my job at the moment to introduce our speaker for the evening, but I do want to go like Panic Rose and go off script briefly for a second. No, and just following up, it was mentioned multiple times how blessed we are here to be able to pay for all the students and their fees and everything. And I just want to acknowledge PBK former member secretary Michael Arias, because it was really his work when he was in the provost and chancellor's office and working with him that enabled us to get the campus funding for that. So even though I get to take credit now, I do want to acknowledge his effort that really set up that tradition, because it's such an important one for our campus. And I think we're essentially the only campus in the country that does that actually pays for the students. So just some recognition out to Mike Arias, because it's clearly a Michael theme today, because I'm Michael Denon, I'm recognizing Mike Arias, and our speaker is Mike Hingson. So we are celebrating physics and Michaels. Michael Hingson, blind since birth, was born to sighted parents who raised him with a can-do attitude. Michael rode a bike and learned to do advanced math in his head. He moved to California and attending college, receiving a master's degree, and I know you're holding your breath, in physics, and a secondary teaching credential from UC Irvine. Michael worked for high-tech companies in management roles until September 11th, 2001, when he and his guide dog, Roselle, escaped from the 78th floor of Tower 1 in the World Trade Center. They were then thrust into the international limelight, where Michael began to share lessons of trust, courage, and teamwork as a public speaker. Mike is the author of the #1 New York Times bestseller, Thunderdog, The True Story of a Blind Man, His Guide Dog, and the Triumph of Trust at Ground Zero. Sold over 2.5 million copies. In 2014, he published his second book, Running with Roselle, A Story for Our Youth. His third book, Live Like a Guide Dog, will be published in August of 2024. You can learn more about it and even pre-order it. We'll have information. Mike has spoken to the world's elite, including George Bush and Larry King. He has appeared on hundreds of TV and radio programs. He has been hired by major organizations to speak on perseverance, the importance of teamwork and trust, moving from diversity to inclusion, and offering adaptive technology training. He also hosts the Unstoppable Mindset podcast, where inclusion, diversity, and the unexpected meet. The Unstoppable Mindset is available wherever you receive your podcast. So with that, let's welcome Mike.
Well, thank you, Mike. I am honored to be here. I'm honored to be one of the people inducted into the Phi Beta Kappa Mu chapter today. And it's especially a great honor to see so many physicists. Just saying. I appreciate that introduction. I was once introduced to an audience by a lawyer who kept his hands in his pockets. And he came up to the podium and he introduced me and he said, I'd like you to meet Michel Hingson and Roselle, two very rare creatures. They are survivors of the World Trade Center terrorist attacks on September 11th, 2001. I wasn't really sure how to respond to that, but when I got to the podium, I was inspired. I said, I want to tell you that there is somebody who is much more a rare creature in our midst, and that's a lawyer who keeps his hands in his own pockets. Oh, anybody coming toward me? Anyway, gang. So I'm curious. I want to ask a couple questions. I'd like to learn about audiences. How many of you know a blind person? How many of you think you have a disability? All right, some of you cheat, but that's okay. For the rest of you, how many of you think it's a bright idea that when a blind lecturer asks you a question, you respond by raising your hands? And that's where we start tonight. I can say without hesitation that things I learned at UC Irvine greatly helped me save my life and helped others on September 11th. One of the most important lessons that I learned in physics, although it wasn't specifically only a physics lesson, but one of the things that I learned was something that various physics professors said. We had a lot of debates about calculators because people were concerned about, in those days, calculators and what they could or couldn't do and how much they would give people an advantage or not an advantage. But one of the things that physics professors, including Dr. Parker, said to me and to all of us on a regular basis was, you have to pay attention to the details. It isn't just getting the numbers right, you got to get the units right, right? And that concept of paying attention to details stuck with me throughout my entire life. I believe that it's very important to focus on details. Like when a blind lecturer says something and asks a question, you don't raise your hands. Just saying. It's not the way to do it. But we really do need to focus on understanding all of the details. Let me give you another example. So how many of you think you don't have a disability? Say aye. Wrong answer. Okay. Now let me explain why. I was in a hotel last year with a niece and nephew when we were coming down from the third floor after putting luggage in our room. It was a main wide staircase, and all of a sudden people below us on the first floor at 3 p.m. started screaming. And I asked my niece, what's going on? She said, we just lost power in the hotel and all around the hotel. People were running around trying to find smartphones, flashlights, and so on so they could see to do what they wanted to do. And it got me seriously to thinking, what is eyesight? Well, Thomas Edison invented the electric light bulb, so we're told, back in 1878, so that's 146 years ago. And what is the electric light bulb? If we go by the definitions provided by the Americans with Disabilities Act, a light bulb, or light on demand, is simply a mechanism that provides light to light-dependent people who can't function without it. The reality is, ladies and gentlemen, in all seriousness, every single person on this planet has a disability. Your light dependence gets covered up by light, but make no mistake, the disability is still there when in those rare instances today, because we have so much light on demand, in those rare instances when you can't find a light source and the power goes out, you have a disability creep up on you. Everyone has a disability. People who I've interviewed on my podcast who are diversity experts tell me all the time, well, but disability starts with dis. It's a lack of ability. And I say disability is not a lack of ability. Disciple starts with dis. Discrete starts with dis. Discern starts with dis. They're not a lack of Eiffel or Crete or CERN. The reality is every person on the planet has a disability. The characteristic is in all of us, but it's different, and it manifests itself differently for different people. But make no mistake, you still have the disability. And we need to recognize that in our society. And we need to carry on a conversation that begins to teach people that just because some of us are different than most other people, it doesn't make us less. I'm always called blind or visually impaired, and I think visually impaired is a horrible term because visually, I don't really look different because I'm blind most of the time, although I do have some cataracts and that makes a difference, but that's because of being blind my entire life, basically. But the reality is I'm not visually different because I'm blind. And impaired, by no means am I impaired. The professionals in the field of work for the blind created that term, and it's the worst thing that could be done because we're constantly referred to as impaired. And that moniker and that attitude sticks with us everywhere we go and with everything that we do. The unemployment rate among employable blind people in this country is between 60 and 65%, still today. I hear all the time about people who want to go into the sciences who are blind and who are opposed by people at colleges. Well, you're visually impaired. Well, get rid of impaired. Blind or low vision is a much more appropriate term. But anyway, the proof of all of that for me is I think what's happened in my life. I did get to go to UC Irvine. I was very blessed. Zot. And I am so honored to be able to be here today. But the reality is that that was only the beginning. And I took to heart many things that I learned while here at the university. And when I was getting my master's degree, I also was a member of an organization called the National Federation of the Blind, and that is an organization of blind consumers around the country, 50,000 plus strong. And I was at the 1974 convention when the president of the federation called me into his office and said, I have a job that will come up in a couple of years and I'd like you to take it. And I said, what is it? We have developed a relationship with a guy named Ray Kurzweil. Ray Kurzweil is a futurist and inventor. Many of you may have heard of him. He's invented the singularity. I'm actually hoping to see Ray again in a few weeks. But Ray developed omnifont optical character recognition. That is to say, he developed a technology that could allow a computer to scan a printed page. Wasn't the same as taking a snapshot today, but scan a printed page. It took a while to build the image, but then it could read all the characters on that page. He wanted to give blind people the ability for the first time to truly read print. And what Jernigan, the president of the Federation, and Ray cooked up was a mechanism to get Ray the funding that he needed to develop the machine because NIH and NSF didn't believe that he could do it and they wouldn't fund him. And so the result of all that was that he needed to find other monetary sources. So the National Federation and Ray developed a program where they went to various foundations and found the funding to buy 5 reading machines at $50,000 each. And then the Federation would put them around the country so that blind people could use those machines and help us create a series of recommendations that would go into the final production model. The job Kenneth Jernigan wanted me to undertake was to live out of suitcases in hotels for 18 months, traveling literally around the country to help people learn to use the machine, observe people learning to use the machine, sometimes repair them when they broke, and eventually write a report giving the final list of recommendations to Ray that needed to go in the machine. So in October of 1976, I went to Cambridge, Massachusetts, and started working with Ray on that project. And the result of that was that the reading machine was released in late 1978. Stevie Wonder bought one. And there were a lot of other people who began doing it. The cost came down. And now, of course, because of that technology that Ray brought to the forefront, it is simply an app on an iPhone or another smartphone. And they're even free. But anyway, if somebody wants to pay the $50,000, I can get you a deal. But the bottom line is that I learned, even from the things and the lessons I learned here about paying attention to details with that product. 8 months later, after the project ended and I had gone to work for Ray, continuing to do human factors studies, I was called into the office of the VP of marketing, and I was told I was being laid off because of the fact that they hired too many non-revenue producing people, and my job wasn't producing revenue, and I was being laid off, unless I was willing to go into sales. Bottom line is, as I tell people, physics people, don't throw anything at me. I decided I would lower my standards and go from science to sales. And I began selling not the reading machine, but a more commercial version, $125,000 unit called the Kurzweil Data Entry Machine. And I did that till Xerox bought the company, and then I had to go out and start looking for a job because I was no longer employed, because Xerox said, thanks for your service, as it were, and I was the last of the salespeople to be released. Well, I looked for jobs, and eventually, not finding one, I started my own company selling PC-based CAD systems to architects and engineers at the beginning of 1985. And I did that for 4 years. And then I went to work. I wanted to go to work for a company again. But I had a problem that I remembered from when I was looking between the end of June of 1984 and the beginning of 1985, when companies wouldn't hire me because I was blind. And I said to my wife, who I had married in 1982, by the way, and Karen was a person with a disability of the more traditional nature as well. She was in a wheelchair her whole life. It was a great marriage. She read, I pushed, worked well. So anyway, I said to her, do I say in my cover letter when we start sending out resumes, I'm blind or I'm not? And she said, as only wives can do, you're a dummy. And I said, why? She said, you've hired a lot of salespeople over the years. You've hired and managed people. What is the most important thing that you tell those people when you hire them? And I say, well, give me a clue. I'm not up with you. She said, you have always told me that when you started working in sales at Kurzweil and they sent you to a Dale Carnegie sales course, the most important thing you ever learned was turn perceived liabilities into assets. Repeat, turn perceived liabilities into assets. What is blindness, folks? It is a perceived liability. It's not the problem. Society's attitudes are the problem. I went off and I wrote a cover letter, and here are the last 2 paragraphs of that cover letter. The most important thing that you need to know about me when you're considering me for a job, and we had a specific one that we had found in the newspaper, by the way, and so this was the first time that we sent out this letter. The most important thing that you need to know about me when you're considering me for this job is that I am blind. As a blind person, I have had to sell all my life to function and survive. We had no ADA and no Air Carrier Access Act or any of those things at this time. So I said in the letter, I've had to sell to convince people to let me buy a house because I'm blind. I've had to sell to convince people to let me take my guide dog on an airplane, take my guide dog into the grocery store, and so on. So when you're hiring somebody for this job, do you want to hire somebody who comes in for 8 or 10 hours a day and then goes home because the job's done? Or do you want to hire somebody who truly understands sales for the science and art that it is and sells 24 hours a day as a way of life? We sent the letter, and 2 weeks later, I got a call. They said, we read your letter, we love it, come in for an interview. And I went down and I was hired on the spot because of that letter. The reality is, turn perceived liabilities into assets. I worked for that company for 6 years, and then they transferred me back to the East Coast because of the fact that we manufactured products that were used on Wall Street, and Wall Street loves to have manufacturers have a presence in the city or around the city. So I went back in 1996. We moved back there, and I worked for the company for another year, and then I went to work for another company. But in 1999, I was hired by Quantum Corporation. Quantum was a company that manufactured most of the tape backup systems that people would use to back up all of their data over their networks and store it on high-density digital linear tape. And the issue was that Wall Street was required by the SEC to keep all data that they had stored on some sort of media off-site for at least 7 years. We sold the products that backed up that data. And I was asked to open an office for Quantum. Well, I looked around a little bit, and then I knew that there had been a bombing in 1993 of the World Trade Center, thought that might be a kind of a fun place, but I rejected looking at it for a while because I figured that the World Trade Center would be pretty expensive. I couldn't find other places to look downtown in the financial area, so finally I decided I'll call the Port Authority real estate people and see what they say. Well, the guy screwed up who talked to me because we started talking, and one of the first things he said is, our occupancy rate in the World Trade Center is only about 80% because of that bombing in 1993. You don't say something like that to a sales guy, right? And I said, oh, really? Yep, so we're really looking to get people in. And I said, well, let's talk about what I would have to pay to come in here. We negotiated, we talked, we negotiated, and we finally negotiated a price that I paid $2 a square foot for 1,400 square feet of office space on the 78th floor of the World Trade Center, Tower 1. I can't build a house for $2 a square foot. Jeez. Anyway, we moved in, and I hired people, hired a number of salespeople, some very bright, some not so bright. One of the things that I told all my salespeople was, my job is not to boss you around. You convinced me that you could sell our product. My job is to add value to what you do. And with each person, we'll figure out what you need and how I can best assist. And of course, for me, assisting a lot was listening to what customers were saying, helping to advise my sales staff, and do other things that help them be successful. So in August of 2001, one of our major distributors, Ingram Micro, called and said, we really need to train some of our reseller partners how to sell your product. And I said, okay, we can set up a seminar. And we decided to set up a seminar. We actually set up 4 seminars. They had 50 people they wanted to come in. And we set them up to do it on September 11th, 2001. Well, the night before, I went to bed and slept the night through, except we had a thunderstorm about 12:30, and Roselle, who was very afraid of thunder, started shaking and shivering. I took her down to my office, and we stayed there for a while until the thunderstorm passed over us. And I mean, the thunderstorm literally passed right over us. The thunderclaps were like explosions. It was amazing. But then it all went away. We went up, got a few more hours of sleep, got up, went into the World Trade Center, and 7:40 that morning on September 11th, I was at my door opening it when somebody came up with a big cart. Because we had ordered breakfast for early arrivals, I showed him where to set up. I went in and got my laptop projector, and I got my laptop and took it all into the conference room where we were going to be showing PowerPoint presentations. Don't think for a minute a blind guy can't do PowerPoint. The only thing that I don't do well with PowerPoint is necessarily aiming the projector exactly right at the beginning. However, David Frank, a colleague from our corporate office who was going to be in for the seminars, arrived with some others at 8 o'clock. We aimed the projector and all was set. I had my script in Braille. I even knew exactly on a screen where the pictures would show up. And I had notes about that on every slide in my Braille script. So I could give that presentation and do it well. Well, so the last thing we had to do before the seminar was to start was to create a list of all the people who would be coming in the course of the day, created for the Port Authority. The reason being is that there were 2 ways you could get into the World Trade Center at that time. Either you showed your ID and your name was crossed off a list, or they had to call up and clear you with the company you were going to see. We wanted to have a list on letterhead that we could fax to the World Trade Center. And at 8:45 in the morning, I reached for letterhead when suddenly we heard a muffled kind of thud or explosion. The building sort of shuddered, and then if you imagine my hand, any blind people in the room? Well, I'll still do it. What we did, my hand that I'm holding up is the tower. Literally, the tower just began to tip and tip and tip. We moved about 20 feet. David, well, I said to David, he was in my office helping me with the list because he had some of the names that we were putting on it. I said, might have been an explosion. And he said, but it didn't sound like it as the building continued to tip. And he said, maybe it was an earthquake. What do you want? David was born in New York, even though ATL was located on this campus, by the way, and he came in from California. He didn't know anything about earthquakes. And I said, no, the building wasn't shaking around. It was going in one direction. I stood in the doorway. Hey, I grew up in Palmdale, California. Building moves, go stand in doorway, right? So I was standing in the doorway, and David was holding onto my desk. Roselle was asleep under my desk. We had some early arrival guests who were in our conference room as the building continued to tip and tip. And then suddenly David said goodbye, and I said goodbye to David because we thought we were about to take a 78-floor plunge to the street. Then the building slowed down, and it stopped. And it started coming back the other way. What you need to understand is tall buildings like that are built with expansion joints. They're made to buffet in windstorms and so on, and in fact, even be hit by an airplane. The Empire State Building was struck in the 1940s by a military aircraft that got lost in a fog bank. Tall buildings are made to buffet. The World Trade Center didn't collapse because airplanes hit the building alone. The buildings collapsed because the resulting explosion of about 26,000 pounds of jet fuel destroyed so much of the infrastructure that eventually made the buildings collapse. In any case, the building came back to be vertical again, and as soon as it did, I went into my office and I met my guide dog, Roselle, coming out from under my desk. And I took Roselle's leash. I can do this. I took Roselle's leash. I told her to heel, which meant to come around and sit next to me on my left side, which she did. Can you all see Alamo? Sit. And when Roselle sat, about that time the building dropped straight down about 6 feet. Because the expansion joints went back to their normal configuration, folks. Now, I learned about what to do in an emergency because when I started working in the World Trade Center, I spent time talking to the Port Authority police, the fire officials, the emergency preparedness people, learning all I could about the complex. I walked around with a white cane, not a guide dog, because the job of a guide dog is to make sure that we walk safely. And if there are things in the middle of our path, the dog will just go around them. But I wanted to know where all the kiosks and other things were. So I used a cane and explored the whole complex. I love to tell people that you could drug me and knock me out, and I would wake up at some point, and 5 seconds later, I would know exactly where I was in the complex. And I knew what to do in an emergency. I had developed a mindset. And so the result of all that was that when the building went down, as it didn't bother me a bit, although I think it did, other people. But the other point was that Roselle just sat there. David turned and looked out the window and started shouting, "Oh my God, Mike, there's fire and smoke above us. There are millions of pieces of burning paper falling outside the window. We got to get out of here right now." And I said, "Slow down, David." "No, we got to get out of here. The building's on fire." Okay, I heard things rustling outside our window. Now I knew what they were, millions of pieces of burning paper, right? But the bottom line is that I knew what to do. A mindset had kicked in because I spent time paying attention to details and learning what to do in an emergency. And I finally got David to focus, and I said, "Look, we got guests in the conference room. Get them to the stairs. Do not let them take elevators because you saw fire, and if that fire gets into elevator shafts, which it did, then people are going to perish. So get them to the stairs and start them down." He did. Then he came back. We swept the office one last time, and we went to the stairs and started down. No question about evacuating. As soon as we got into the stairwell, I began smelling an odor, and it took me probably about 4 floors before I realized finally that what I was smelling were the fumes from burning jet fuel. And I observed that to other people around me on the stairwell, and they said, "You're right, we were trying to figure it out. It's jet fuel, it's kerosene. We must have been hit by an airplane." None of us knew. None of us were where the plane hit. We were on the other side of the building for the most part. Nobody came down or was with us from much closer who had any clue. None of us knew. Reporters tell me all the time, "Well, of course you didn't know what happened because you couldn't see it." dim-witted reporters. The reality is Superman and X-ray vision are fictitious. None of us knew what happened, but we assumed it because of what we smelled in the way of burning jet fuel. So as we went down the stairs, we focused, and about 10 floors down, a woman suddenly stopped behind me on the stairs and said, "I can't go on, I can't breathe, we're not going to make it out." And I stopped, and I turned around, and I said, "Of course you can. Come on, let's keep going. You're fine. We're all going to make it out okay." And other people surrounded her. We literally had a group hug on the stairs. And then Roselle gave her some kisses, and we continued down the stairs, and she went with us. We got to about the 50th floor eventually, and suddenly David, who had gotten a little bit quiet, suddenly said, "Mike, we're going to die. We're not going to make it out of here." And I said, "Stop it, David. If Roselle and I can go down these stairs, so can you." And I said that in as sharp a voice as I can. Now, another detail I paid attention to, it's a secret, most of you probably don't know about it, but in the School of Education, when I was going through, Ken Bailey was the dean of the school, and there was a secret course he taught called Voice 101, How to Yell at Students. It's a secret course. I'm just telling you, but you'll never find it, and I'll deny it if you tell anyone. Anyway, I shouted at David as sharply as I could because I wanted to get him back to focusing. And he told me later that snapping at him like that brought him out of his funk. And he said, "I got to get my mind on something. I'm going to walk below you, a floor, and tell people what I see on the stairs and tell you what I see." And I said, "Okay." He said, "Do you mind?" I said, "No, that's fine." Did I need him to do it? No. Would it have made a difference? Not really, probably, but nevertheless, that's what happened. Anyway, David walked a floor below us, and so eventually I got to the 48th floor, and I heard David below me, "Hey, I'm at floor 47. All's clear, Mike. Going on down the stairs." I got to 47. 46th floor, all is good. Same at floor 46, and when I got to the 45th floor, David said, "Hey, I'm at the 44th floor. This is where the Port Authority cafeteria is. Not stopping, going on down the stairs." I think that's one of the coolest things when I reflect back on it that happened that day. Why? Because as David shouted, "43rd floor, all clear here," David was being a focal point, a beacon for anyone within the sound of his voice who could hear him, who clearly now understood that there was someone around them somewhere on the stairwell who was okay. He helped a lot of people focus. I helped a lot of people focus. People told me later that they kind of always heard me praising Roselle. "Good girl, good dog, keep going, what a good dog." And they followed me down the stairs, figuring that if this blind guy can go down the stairs and not be afraid, then so can we. We eventually got to the 30th floor, and there were firefighters coming up the stairs, carrying all of the equipment that they needed to fight the fire. Why were they carrying the equipment? Where would you put it in the World Trade Center where it might not be below where a fire was? So you had to carry the equipment with you. And the firefighters passed us, and they wanted to help me down the stairs, and I resisted because I didn't want to break up their team. And finally I had to say, "Look, my friend David is here who can see, leave us go." And David said, "Yeah, he's good." But Roselle gave some of those people some kisses, probably the last unconditional love they ever got in their lives. And then they went on up, and we went on down. We eventually got to the first floor, and when we got to the first floor, the water sprinklers were on, so there was this completely incredible waterfall curtain of water separating us from the lobby. And that was because if fire got into the stairwell up above, it couldn't get out of the stairwell into the lobby, or if there was fire in the lobby, it couldn't get into the stairwell because of the water. We went through the water, got out on the other side, and suddenly I heard somebody yelling with a bullhorn, "Don't go outside, don't go that way, no, go this way, go into the central part of the complex. No, don't go out, come this way." And I didn't know at the time what was going on, of course, but I also realized later they were having people go back toward the main part of the World Trade Center complex rather than going outside through the doors that would have taken them outside, because outside people were jumping from up above. In any case, a guy comes up to us and he says, "I'm with the FBI, I'll get you where you need to go." And of course, my warped sense of humor, I'm thinking to myself, I only talked to McGarrett from 5-0, who are you? And I didn't do anything anyway. But no, he took us where we needed to go, which was through the whole complex, up an escalator, and finally outside the complex right by Borders Books, but as far from the Twin Towers as we could be. As soon as we got outside, we were told to leave the area, but David looked around and he said, "Mike, I see fire in Tower 2. I went, "What are you talking about?" And he said, "Yeah, there's fire in Tower 2. "Are you sure?" "Yeah." Had no idea what was going on. We were told to leave the area, so we walked over to Broadway. We turned north on Broadway on the west side of the street, so right on my left was a building. On my right was Broadway. We walked up several streets, and eventually we got to Vesey Street, and we stopped there because David wanted to take some pictures. He could see Tower 2's fire very clearly, and I wanted to try to call my wife. I had called Karen just before we left the building, before we left the 78th floor, to tell her that there had been an explosion or something. Scooped Good Morning America by 8 minutes, and nobody's given me a Pulitzer for that. I'm really disgusted. Anyway, and she wanted to know more, and I said, "I don't know anymore. I'll call you when I can." Well, we got outside. We got to Vesey, and I took my phone out of my pocket, and I tried to call her, but I couldn't get through. The circuits were busy. Of course, people were saying goodbye to loved ones. In any case, we stood there a moment. David was taking pictures. I put my phone away. Suddenly a police officer yelled, "Get the hell out of here, it's coming down now." We heard this rumble that became this deafening roar. I describe it as kind of a combination of a freight train and a waterfall. You could hear glass breaking, metal clattering down, and then suddenly this white noise as Tower 2 just started pancaking straight down, and it collapsed. Everyone turned and ran. David ran. He was gone. And I could hear debris falling around us. I turned with Roselle. I literally picked her up by the harness, turned her around, and we ran back the way we came. And as we ran, I just did my best to continue to focus. I got hit by a couple small pieces of concrete, nothing major, just cut an ear a little bit, but nothing serious. We got back to the next street, which was Fulton Street, turned right on Fulton Street. I ran about 25 yards, suddenly caught up to David because David had gone that same way and realized that he had left me, and so he was going to come back and find me, but I found him first. So in any case, we started running, and David apologized for leaving, and I said, "Don't worry about it, David. Let's just keep going. The building's coming down." And suddenly we were caught in the dust cloud. We were engulfed in this dust and debris. Literally, with every breath I took, I could feel things going down into my lung and settling. I don't know what smoking is like. I've never done it, but if that's what it is, all the more reason I never want to do it. But the bottom line is that was occurring, and David was telling me that he couldn't see his hand 6 inches in front of his face. We kept running, and I then started telling Roselle, right. So if you kept up with my directions, you'll know that on my right-hand side now, because we were running, well, now we were running west on Fulton Street. When we were running south on Broadway, the building was on my right. We turned right, we're going west on Fulton, and now there was a building to my right. And I kept telling Roselle, right. I don't know whether she could see my hand signals. I don't know whether she could hear me or not, but I was also listening for an opening. I can hear when there's an opening if we're passing one, especially when there's a lot of noise to help find it. Anyway, suddenly I heard an opening. Obviously, Roselle knew what we wanted. She turned right, she took one step, and she stopped, and she would not move. She would not move. She planted her feet. You need to understand, again, as I said, what a guide dog does. A guide dog doesn't lead a blind person. I hate reporters when they say that. The job of a guide dog is to make sure that we walk safely. I need to know where I'm going and how to get there. How do I do that? Well, how do you guys do it? I'm amazed that you guys can do that without a dog or a cane. But the bottom line is that the techniques are there, and I used them, and I knew where we were and what was going on. But when Roselle stopped, I wasn't sure what was going on, but I realized suddenly she stopped. There has to be a reason. I stuck my hand out along the wall and stuck out a foot and found a drop-off and a stair rail with my hand. We were at the top of a flight of stairs. Roselle did her job perfectly. She got a hug, and then I said, "Okay, Roselle, forward," which is what she was waiting for. And we walked down the stairs, and we found ourselves in an arcade entrance to the Fulton Street subway station. There was a woman down at the bottom of the stairs saying, "I can't see, my eyes are full of dirt, I can't see, I don't want to fall into the subway." I came down near her, and I went over to her, and I touched her arm, and I said, "Hey, don't worry, I'm blind, I got my guide dog here, we're not going to let you fall down the stairs, you're about 10 feet away from them anyway. So try to clear your eyes." And then a couple minutes later, a guy came up from further down in the subway system. He introduced himself as Lou, an employee of the subway system. There were about 8 or 9 of us, and he took us all to an employee locker room downstairs. And we stayed there for a while until a police officer came and said, "You need to leave now. The air is clearer up above." And we went back up through the arcade, went back up the last 2 flights of stairs, got outside. David looked around and he said, "Oh my God, Mike, there's no Tower 2 anymore." And I said, "What do you see?" He said, "All I see are fingers. Well, I see pillars of smoke hundreds of feet tall. That's it." "You sure?" "Yeah." We stood there for a moment, and then we turned and continued west on Fulton Street and walked for a while. Walked about 10 minutes, and then we were in this little plaza area when we suddenly heard that freight train waterfall sound again, and we knew that it had to be our building falling. But David looked back and he said, "There's another dust cloud coming." There was a little retaining wall. We went behind the retaining wall and we ducked down and we waited until everything passed us by, and then we got up and again David said, "Oh my God, Mike, there's no World Trade Center anymore." And I said, "What do you see?" And he said, "I see fingers of fire and flame hundreds of feet tall, pillars of smoke. It's gone." We stood there for a moment, and then I tried to call my wife, Karen, and this time I got through, and after some tears on both sides of the phone, she told us how 2 aircraft had deliberately been hijacked and crashed into the towers, 1 into the Pentagon, and a 4th was still missing over Pennsylvania. Of course, that's Flight 93 that crashed in Shanksville because of the brave actions of the passengers. We worked all day to get up toward Midtown Manhattan, and eventually I was able to get a train to come back home. And at about 7 o'clock, I pulled into the Westfield train station on the Raritan Valley line. I'd called my wife. A friend of ours who Karen had known since high school, actually in California, Tom Painter, had come down, not knowing whether I was still or was working that day or at home or what, but he stayed with Karen. He drove her to the station. And at 7 o'clock, I heard our van pull up as I was getting off the train. I went down, walked up the ramp into our van, and got to hug Karen finally for the first time that day. We went home. I took Roselle's harness off, figuring I'd take her outside. She would have none of it. She jerked away and went and found her toy box and her favorite tugboat and started playing tug of war with my retired guide dog, Linny. It was over. Dogs don't do what if. And I asked the veterinarians at Guide Dogs for the Blind about it later, and that's what they said. Nothing threatened her. She's fine. It was over. And so then Guide Dogs put out a little story about me that got a lot of visibility, and I had the first of 5 interviews on Larry King Live on November 14th, that Friday, September 14th, that Friday of 2001. And eventually people started calling and saying, "Would you come and tell us your story? Tell us what we should learn from September 11th. Tell us about leadership. Tell us things that you think we should know." And the more I thought about it, and the more I thought about the way things were going, it seemed like it was a much better thing for me to do with my life than continuing to sell computer hardware and managing a hardware sales force. As I put it, selling life and philosophy is a whole lot more rewarding and a lot more fun than selling computer hardware. And so I started accepting those requests, and then in late December, we were out for the Tournament of Roses parade. Guide Dogs for the Blind had a float, and I was asked to be on the float. And the CEO of Guide Dogs asked if I would consider joining to be their public spokesperson, and I could go ahead and continue to speak. So I did. And so I did both of those for a while, and then a new CEO joined in 2008 who said nobody was interested in September 11th anymore, so we're phasing out your job. She did such a good job, she lasted 18 months before the board told her to go away because she had so demoralized the school that the training department was even considering organizing a union. But by that time, I was gone, so I've been speaking alone ever since. I have helped a couple of other companies bring products to market. I'm now working with a company called Accessibee that uses artificial intelligence to help make internet websites more accessible, and they're sponsoring the podcast. But most of what I do, a lot of what I do anyway, is traveling and speaking. And I'll be real upfront and say if y'all like this and there's an opportunity to come back and talk to students or help with faculty training and so on about disabilities and stuff, always open for opportunities. So there's my plug. But would love to explore ways of doing that. But the bottom line is the lessons I learned here about paying attention to details have always stuck with me. I think it's something that we all have to do. We can't assume everyone is the same. We can't assume every situation will always be the same. We need to look and analyze, and we need to develop a mindset that will allow us to do that. In 2020, I realized I've been talking about being an escapee from the World Trade Center without being afraid for 22 years. And one of the things, at that time it was 18 years, I guess, or no, whatever it was, 19 years. But I decided that I needed to really do something about the fact that I never taught people how to learn to control fear. So I began writing Live Like a Guide Dog, true stories from a blind man and his dogs about being brave, overcoming adversity, and walking in faith. And the whole idea behind the book is that I learned a lot from my various dogs about what to do in an emergency or fearful situation so you can control that fear and use it as a powerful tool, not as something to be afraid of and that will, as I put it, blind you or overwhelm you. And I submit that everyone here can learn how not to let fear get in your way, but be a powerful tool for you. And as you heard, we do have bookmarks for Live Like a Guide Dog. We're going to be selling Thunderdog books over here, and you can come also and grab bookmarks as well. And there's a QR code where you can pre-order Live Like a Guide Dog. We have a bunch of copies of Thunderdog, and we appreciate you buying them because Apple tells me, or Alamo tells me that we're running low on kibbles and we need your help. So please come and buy some books because Alamo says I don't want to starve. Just saying, you know. But anyway, that's my story. I believe that my job in this world today is, given the fact that there is so much history, people don't know that much about the World Trade Center. Students are all people who only know about it from history, whatever they're taught. So my job is to help keep people informed about that. And that's what I get to do, and it's a joy to do. And so we're having a lot of fun doing it, and I hope that this has been good for all of you. I'd like to end by reading you something from Thunderdog. It's called Guide Dog Wisdom, Lessons I Learned from Roselle on September 11th. And it goes like this. There's a time to work and a time to play. Know the difference. When the harness goes on, it's time to work. Work hard. Others are depending on you. Number 2, focus in and use all of your senses. Learn to tell the difference between a harmless thunderstorm and a true emergency. Don't let your sight get in the way of your vision. Number 3, sometimes the way is hard, but if you work together, someone will pass along a water bottle just when you need it. And that happened on the stairs going down. Number 4, Roselle's favorite, always, but always kiss firefighters. Number 5, ignore distractions. There's more to life than playing fetch or chasing tennis balls. Number 6, listen carefully to those who are wiser and more experienced than you. They'll help you find the way. I think that's important. Number 7, don't stop until work is over. Sometimes being a hero is just doing your job. Number 8, the dust cloud won't last forever. Keep going and look for the way out. It will come. Number 9, shake off the dust and move on. Remember the first guide dog command, forward. Number 10, when work is over, play hard with your friends and don't forget to share your favorite bow to bone. Thank you all. Hope to see you afterward. Help the good guys win.
Thank you so much, Michel Hingson. Thank you so much for your wisdom and then words of wisdom and for hope. And so I have a small gift for you. So I would like to be, on the behalf of the Mu chapter, we have a small gift as a token of appreciation for you to come here today. Okay.
Oh my goodness. And what does it say? I'm illiterate, unless it's in Braille.
Okay, so 1974 to 2024, 50th anniversary, celebrating excellence in the liberal arts and sciences. Deepest appreciation for your service, Michel Hingson. UC Irvine, Phi Beta Kappa, Mu of California, UC Irvine.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's my honor, and I'm really glad to have been able to be here and looking forward to getting a chance to chat with more of you.
As I provide the closing remarks to this year's Alumni Reunion Dinner, I want to take a moment to reflect on the enlightening and inspiring experiences that we have shared today. Each moment has reinforced the core value of PBK holds dear: the pursuit of knowledge, the love of wisdom, and a steadfast commitment to our scholarly community. Our gathering today reminds us of the importance of intellectual curiosity and the diverse disciplines that drives human progress. Before we depart, I would like to leave you with a heartfelt request. The continued success and impact of PBK relies not only on your collective intellectual efforts, but also on your generous support. As alumni, your contribution will enable MU Chapter to continue its effort to continue providing the UCI community with robust annual programming, along with continuing our inclusive excellence initiatives, of funding of all new inductees at the start of their lifelong journey as a member of PBK. When we reach out to you at the start of the next year with the All New campaign, I invite you to consider making a donation to PBK. Your gift, no matter the size, will make a significant difference. When we gather again in 2026 at the MU Chapter's reunion, I hope that we can turn today's 150 alumni and a guest into 250 alumni and a guests to celebrate the 250th anniversary of PBK. Thank you for your unwavering enthusiasm, commitment, and generosity. And finally, I'd like to invite all of you to continue enjoying your meal, if you're still eating, and each other's company. At the 6:20, Michael will be signing copies of his book, Thunderdog, available for purchase at the table next to the stage. Please feel free to form the line around the perimeter of the room. And when Alamo his harness is off, so that means he's off duty, so you're welcome to enjoy patting him. Thank you so much for coming today.